So as the title of the exhibition suggests, it's 10 years of acquisitions to our collection. So acquisitions dating back to 2012, which also happens to correspond with the amount of time that I've been curating here. So this is an opportunity for us to celebrate our permanent collection and also a chance to reflect on the development of the collection, ways that we can do better going forward, and to think about today's context and in relation to the development of the collection. The collection began with the founding of the gallery in 1978. So at this point, we have quite a mature collection, and I would say that you know, the curator and director at the time in 1978 would have a different vision than me at this point. And so I'm finding now this is a chance for me curatorially to really think about ways that work has been collected and what our vision might be for going forward. And in bringing all this work together, I know that many of you who come to our exhibitions will recognize a lot of the work, because it's been acquired in the last 10 years and it emerges out of our exhibitions largely. So you might recognize work, but it's a chance for us to for the work to be in conversation with each other in new ways, for artists to be showing together in new ways. And as I said, the collection is aligned with the curatorial vision, so it's very intentionally considered, and it reflects the support of artists over the last 10 years and our relationships that we've built with artists, and also being part of a broader conversation about contemporary art nationally. Acquisitions come to us by donations, largely through private collectors, institutions, artists, and bequests from estates, and also purchases. So I'll try and pepper in some information about how each work came into the collection as we go, if I can and if time allows. So I consider a collection, I think about it in terms of a cultural archive. So if you were to look back in another 10 years or say 50 or 100, what would it say about our culture at this time and the social and political context, and also about the formal concerns of artists. So I really think it's like archaeology in that way. And so by work coming into our care, we are creating a cultural record. And I want to mention also what's so exciting for us in showing our collection is that we are also launching our collection online. So you know, as Margaret said, we're a nonprofit, we're a public art gallery, and this is for the public, it's for you. And so now you can access our collection online by going to our website, going to the collection tab, and we actually have the creators of the website with us, Dahlia and Paige, who are from Two Story Robots, so we've been working over many months with them to be able to do this. And so the majority of our collection is now online, which means it's accessible for researchers and educators and other curators, and it means that our collection can be lent across the country to other institutions. So we're very excited about that. And if you want to have a look, there is a couch in the South Corridor, which you might really want to sit on soon. And you can browse through on our iPad. We have available there too. So this exhibition shares 98 artworks, which is 3% of our over 3,100 artworks in our collection. And of those 98, there are 11 works that are in the process of being acquired. There are 25 artists, and the work spans about 100 years. So as I go through, I'll try to indicate that timeline for you. The first title of the exhibition, Reading the Land, really comes out of me looking at the work that we've acquired in the last 10 years, and the big theme that emerged is land or landscape. That was really clear to me, and so I'm thinking about reading the land in terms of like how you do a critical reading. I've organized it into 5 themes. So they're on the walls as you go through the sections, and I'll talk in detail as we go through. Land and representation, that's the area that we're in right now. Nature and culture, animals and land, from the land, and experiments on the land. And these are ways that I could make sense of the groupings. And then this booklet that I was mentioning that you can get at our admissions desk, I've written longer texts. We've just included a sort of synopsis in each section, but they're kind of essays that go through each artist and each work and the themes and the conversations that I was thinking about. So the questions that I was asking when I was thinking about how to read the land were how our Canadian identity is shaped by visual culture, how narratives about the settlement of Canada have changed over time, what are the connections between land and language, humans and animals and the natural environment, and how have artists represented or intervened and experimented on the land. So all very rich topics indeed. I also you can have that. Want to offer a version of Reading the Land that was offered to us by Jessica Arnoos, who's the language coordinator at the Kamloops Secwepemc Language and Cultural Department. And this is also available in text on vinyl in the wall in the South Corridor. So we had asked for Jessica, in consultation with Secwepemc elders, to translate Reading the Land. And she said, well, from a Secwepemc worldview, Secwepemc Ulu is a living landscape that is interconnected with our history, people, animals, other living beings, plants, and experienced events. Over many generations, our people learned that Secwepemc Ulu, through our ancient stories as told by our elders and traditional knowledge keepers, they hold layers of messaging, moral and social, encoded in our language, Secwepemc. And this develops our sense of knowing and our identity. The way we view the Secwepemc landscape is described through the seasonal round and place names. This keeps the memory alive and shapes the mind. In the Kamloops Secwepemc Cultural Heritage Study, there's a Secwepemc word, hukten, which is cultural landscapes. So we've added that as a translation on top of our title and integrating it with the thinking around this exhibition. One of the tidiest definitions of a cultural landscape is an idea embedded in a place. The definition conveys the critical importance of human experience and imaginings of a place rather than its physical condition or age. While emphasis is on the ideas, the place itself matters. In a Secwepemc context, one place can carry multiple ideas. Some are held personally, some by families or other specific groups, and some by the community as a whole. So I feel like Dina's opening too really carries that sentiment. And it also, for me, was nice to reconsider how I might be thinking about reading the land. That was a really beautiful offering for me. I brought you mostly into this corridor here because as we enter the exhibition, we have 3 works by Franklin Carmichael, who is a member of the Group of 7, one of the founding members. And those of you who might not know, the Group of 7 was founded in the 1920s, and they were a group of artists in central Canada, and their mission really was to create landscape paintings that conveyed the essence of Canada at the time. So these works are just beautiful small paintings that we have not shown before. It's a recent acquisition to us, and they join now, that's 11 Franklin Carmichael works that we have in our collection. And so the Group of 7 are known for these quite heroic, vast landscapes, rugged landscapes of what have been deemed by art historian John O'Brien as a wild centrism. And so this idea that they're just an empty, vast Canada to explore. Now, Franklin Carmichael was rare in the group that he stayed close to where he lived in Orillia, Ontario. And so his paintings convey more of the kind of farmland landscape where he had his family and his commitments. But you know, there's been many academics who have written about the Group of Seven's idea of Canada and this mission that they were on to kind of convey this idea of an empty Canadian landscape, and it's been revisited. And so I wanted to do the same here, is just a reminder, well, we are very fortunate to have this cultural record in our collection. It's also important to think about the lack of people in the Group of Seven's paintings. And so on the other side, kind of starting from me here, there are some also very empty landscapes, very vast Rocky Mountain prints by Gordon Smith, who was a well-known Canadian modernist. Also, just like capturing the exquisite kind of quality of this mountain landscape. And then there's also one that is like just this emptiness of water. So within that context, I was thinking about people working on the land and the more than thousands of years of indigenous habitation on the land and use of the land. And so in the middle, I've included a drawing by Daphne Odjig, who is from the Mantuan Reserve, and she's well known for her really colorful, vivid prints, and for being a really major figure in promoting Indigenous printmaking and Indigenous art making across the country. This is this rare drawing that came to us from a private collector that is just quite a simple sketch of a man out in snowshoes about to maybe go and chop down a tree. And so I wanted to include that reminder on this wall here of people working on the land. And then in this corridor here, we have another major figure in Canadian art history, Jack Shadbolt. And so, you know, we go from the 1920s, and then in the 1930s and 40s, we have these early drawings by Jack Shadbolt. So his career was, you know, early on as a war artist. He wasn't an official war artist, but he spent time representing Canada in the Second World War. And so, you know, there's an amazing quote that I'd like to read about the context in which he was working by curator Scott Watson. Just to give you a sense of the kind of context he was coming out of against the backdrop of global events, including the Great Depression and the Second World War. And the anxiety and optimism of that time and the threat of ecological catastrophe. And Scott Watson says, I believe that they, being Jack Shadbolt's paintings and drawings, reenact the traumatic and violent relationships to the natural world that has characterized British Columbia's resource-based economy from the colonial times to the present. The historical struggle of First Nations people against the obliterating forces of colonialist culture and law is also intrinsic to any attempt to achieve a distinctly regional landscape painting, which was what Jack Shadbolt was really on about, creating and defining a West Coast modernist painting. And Scott Watson says, the sense of an uneasy relationship between cultures, mainly European and Native, become even more acute in Shadbolt's abstractions, which are not merely based on nature, but an attempt to define it. So I wanted to include some early drawings of Jack Shadbolt's, and particularly there's one drawing that is called color note, Indian Reserve from the 1940s. So, you know, the language, the use of language has certainly changed. And, you know, he was just mapping out this landscape that he was drawing for a larger painting. A lot of his sketches were for really large paintings that he would do, very colorful. So we have that early drawing, and then I've also included some work where he really gets into abstraction and this real, like this expressive feeling of wild nature, and I'm using quotes. And then so you get to the end, you see one of his really colorful paintings called Shield. Another aspect that I wanted to draw out in thinking about Jack Shadbolt's work is how modernists of the time were, you know, now that we look back, we think about the drawing on so-called exotic or you know, other imagery. So Jack Shadbolt, along with Emily Carr, would visit reserves and, you know, draw on imagery and content for their work based on totems that they saw or masks. And so there's a kind of reenacting of exploiting indigenous cultures that was happening at the time. But again, you know, this is an opportunity to read that context from today's point of view. Just at the end of the hallway here are two landscape paintings that are very abstract by Ted Smith, who is a local Kamloops-based artist who we had an exhibition of his in 2014, and he would do a lot of fishing out in the region, and he studied with Jack Shadbolt, so I thought it was nice to show them together and to show also this, you know, there's not any recognizable place in those works, but again, he's getting an essence through abstraction of the environment. So those works came to us by private donors, and with Jack Shadbolt's work, we have 82 works of his in our collection, and so this is really just a small example, but 79 of those came to us from Simon Fraser University and the estate of Doris Shadbolt, his wife, who's also a curator. And so that's you know, interesting to point out just in terms of thinking about institutional relationships that we build. So they were deaccessioning that work, and so that's how it came to us. And then I've centered this entire grouping of work here with this wall as a way to point to some of the ideas that I've been talking about. So there's two prints on the left by Tania Willard, who is a Secwepemc artist who is based in Chase on the Nisconluth Reserve, and a print by Lawrence Paul Yuxweluptun. There's also an offering that Tania just whipped up for us last minute in the South Corridor, which is amazing. She took a birch bark and it's etched with the Bush Gallery manifesto. So she also, in addition to being an artist and a curator, she runs Bush Gallery on her land, which is an invitation to artists and curators to come and to think about the connections between land and language and you know, conceptual practices, performance, video. She also teaches at the UBCO, and so she's always inviting people to collaborate with her there. And the manifesto is just, it's quite powerful, so I encourage you to read that. And so I wanted to include I Love Indian Country because of the relationship, of course, to the work that I just pointed out of Jack Shadbolt's and the different use of language. There's a reclaiming of language that's happening. The work that you'll see, there's a young boy on a pony. It's called Baby Boy's Got an Indian Pony. And this is something that's happening also in Terence Hoole's work in the Cube, and I'm sorry that we all can't fit in there and that we can't listen to Terence talk about his work, but that's essentially that you'll see a performance by Terence in the Cube where he is literally physically breaking the bricks of the residential school that his parents went to, and they're in the video as well with him. And so there's a healing and an empowerment with this reclamation of language and reusing it in a positive way, like I love Indian country. Alongside this print by Tania, she's also has a print that's called Land is Life. And this project, it says a tiny house warrior. So this was actually a GoFundMe campaign where Tania made 25 prints, and it was all the funds were going towards the land defenders who are on Secwepemc territory defending land from the Trans Mountain pipeline activity. And so I wanted that also just to really center the exhibition and thinking about what's happening right now around on these lands. And connected to that work that you'll see in this small print, again, most of you would know Lawrence Paul Yuxweluptun's work is very vibrant, and he's known for these using ovoid abstractions in huge paintings. This is just this little moment that says so much, where it's called Little Reservations in BC, and there's a sliver of land amidst this vast landscape in the background in his ancestral territories. The other room, the theme there that I'm working with is nature and culture. There's 3 artists who are showing in there, Andrea Kastner, Gary Pearson, who is here tonight, and Adad Hanna. The thinking with that thematic section actually came from me writing about the work, and then I thought, well, did I already write about this at some point? And I realized in a 2013 exhibition, Landscape Revised, I had revisited a statement by previous CAG curator Annette Hertig, the curator before me, for a 1996 exhibition, which was called The Culture of Nature. And so Annette made a statement that always stuck with me. She said, how we think about land, about nature, about the relationship between culture and nature has become one of the principal intellectual battlefields of our time. And so I would say, you know, although the global circumstances and environmental urgency has changed a lot since 1996 and even 2013, it's still a major issue for artists who are reflecting on these ideas. So it's emerging time and time again. And so Andrea Kastner was an artist who was interested, all of her work really is about painting things that are unseen. So she took time walking through the back alleys of Kamloops, and so her paintings are kind of revealing our waste. So her work came out of an exhibition here called Wasteland. So you'll see garbage dumps and the back alleys where people accumulate things. And then Gary Pearson's work is maybe wouldn't think of him as a landscape painter, but I was thinking about how what he's expressing is internal worlds and how critical that is for thinking about how we relate to the world around us. So you'll see in a large painting by Gary, there's a figure who's sitting in an outdoor patio, which sounds very nice right now. And he's surrounded by palms. It's called Under the Blue Palms. And it's just saturated paint, and you kind of get this mood of the guy who's sitting there. He's being served a drink. And so, I like that he's offering us this kind of special view, and maybe thinking about the solitary figure and the self in the landscape, which comes up a lot in other work in the exhibition too. And then Adad Hannah's work, The Raft of the Medusa. So that work, some of it was shown here in his 2019 exhibition. So this is also a chance to show the work that's since been donated to us, that we haven't shown before. But he plays with the recreation and restaging of historical paintings. So you'll see a photograph and a video by Adad in that room, where he's recreated Theodore Géricault's The Raft of the Medusa. And he was asked by a rancher in 100 Mile to come and stage this historical painting, which is what Adad likes to do. He comes into communities and works collaboratively with groups of people, because this rancher, Gus Horn, really saw a connection between the story that Géricault was painting in this kind of very heroic historical painting with the history and the moment that Géricault was capturing was the shipwreck of the French frigate, the Méduse. And basically 147 of the members on the shipwreck had died, only 15 survived, and it was very controversial at the time because the captain abandoned ship, basically. So this rancher in 100 Mile, Gus Horn, said, I see this would be an interesting parallel for what he saw as neglect from the government in the cattle ranching industry and the forestry industries in 100 Mile. And so Adad went and worked with volunteers from the community, and they restaged this. And you can see these living pictures that he creates where the people have to stand still for many minutes, and their bodies start to move, and they become living pictures. So in this room, this is land and animal, as you might guess. We have this work, as I mentioned, by Dana Claxton, and a work next to her, photographs on this wall by Rebecca Belmore. So what I was thinking about with this grouping was, of course, about our relationship to other living beings. And with Dana Claxton's work, so these two photographs, as I mentioned, they're part of the Mustang suite. And so it's baby boy's got an Indian pony is on the left, and daddy's got a new ride is on the right. And so it's part of a suite of photographs where Dana Claxton was using the Mustang or the horse as kind of a symbolic metaphor for the expansion of the West and these ideas of the wild, unpopulated West, and how this has this sort of drive towards colonialism, and it's had great effects on trade and mobility, and of course affected the introduction of the horse by the Spanish in the 1600s really affected cultural interaction, of course, between indigenous people and the settlers through this expansion. And so she's chosen to represent a modern indigenous family, and the gaze is right at the viewer, and they are empowered. She uses this bold color throughout, and Daddy's very proud of his new ride, and so she's kind of turning the tables in that way. But also, I think it just says everything about the history that she's talking about by through the use of the horse and the use of the car. Next to her, we have this small but also very powerful photograph by Rebecca Belmore, who many of you would know as kind of one of the most well-known Indigenous contemporary artists in Canada. She's known more for her performance and video work. This photograph is called Torch from 2006, and you know, it almost looks like Dana Claxton could have made it. It's just, it's really stunning next to that work, I think, dealing with similar ideas. And so the torch, Rebecca's speaking to her Anishinaabe ancestry and recalling symbolic meanings of Lady Liberty's flame. So the light of freedom that illuminates the way to enlightenment, and all of the ideas that came along with the Age of Reason, and really binding that bound Indigenous people to the state. And she's using an American flag here, and she's also purposely not holding the flame as if it was lit, but down, to talk about that tight binding and the effects, again, of colonization. And here we have a video by the Feminist Land Art Retreat. So this was an exhibition that we had here in 2020, and it's really exciting for us because we've got these new monitors and we're showing it in a different way. And for me, it's like seeing the work for the first time again. It was originally installed as a large installation with 3 floating screens that were projected, and then these bags that hung from the ceiling with hay in them. And so we're showing it here again, and now you can really see the relationship between these 3 places that they're depicting. This is a video called No Man's Land, a trilogy. And so they went to first to Berlin, Germany, the video in the center, and then Heffley, BC, Heffley Creek, which is about 45 minutes from here, and then Gallisto in New Mexico. And so this work is really featuring the animal, the horse, as the central character, and getting also at these ideas of what the archetypal cowboy might be by flipping it on its head and featuring women as the central character. So in Berlin, they worked with some women mostly on a dude ranch, a faux dude ranch in Germany. They were quite interested in going there because of the fascination that German culture has with the Western. And so this was a place that was kind of recreating that idea of the Western, and you could go there and have that experience on a ranch. But they also, these women did Feldenkrais, which is a kind of healing practices with horses. And so there's more of a generative kind of relationship with the horse. And then the video right here from Heffley Creek, this is a working ranch. And so these are working horses who are herding the cattle. And the FLAR video in Gallisto, New Mexico, they went and stayed with an artist, Denise Lynch, and she gathers earth and clay from her land, and she makes pottery and objects from the land, and she also works with her horses in a very generative way. And so I think there's also some tinges of the artists really are interested in the sci-fi genre and that relationship with Westerns, and thinking about maybe the horse, featuring the horse as a sentient being who has agency into the future. The next section, we do have one work in this room, and then the others are in behind me here, is From the Land. So what I was thinking about here is I've grouped the artists Rodney Konopaki and Rhonda Neufeld, whose work is featured on this wall, along with Anne Kipling, Tony Onley, and George Raab, and Germaine Koh, who are behind me. If we get there, I'll speak to them as well. So these are all artists who I would say are actually working on the land and drawing their work from the land. In the case of Rodney and Rhonda, this was an exhibition that they did in the Cube, and now we have an opportunity to show it just on one giant wall. In 2014, they came here and they did a project called Suggestions from Kamloops. And they did a kind of mapping, and so they collaboratively took a piece of paper on a board and walked side by side, and the markings came from their movements on the land. And Rhonda came here this week and further drew this map onto the wall as part of this project. So you'll see the locations where they went. They started at Mission Flats, TRU, MacArthur Island, and then of course some of you might recognize Peterson Creek coming through here, and the Squatman Heritage Park down low, Victoria Street where we are, and then ending at Highland Valley Copper. So again, really resonating with ideas of land use. Each of these locations, has different meaning here. And so they're kind of like these floating maps and the residue of their experience walking. And they've spray painted on the back, so they really glow, and they have this kind of sculptural presence. And they used intaglio, which is a kind of gouging into the paper and letting the pigments come through, and some washes. I'm sure Rhonda has lots more to say about this project if you want to talk to her. Tony Onley is, I included him in this grouping that I was thinking about because he's known for flying his own airplane, especially through the Arctic, but also throughout BC. And so he was a watercolorist, born in the UK, but really came to depict the Canadian landscape in the Arctic. And in 2004, Roger Boulet was a guest curator here, and he curated Onley's True North at the gallery, and that was a touring exhibition and a publication that came out of that. And so he was very prolific, and out of that we also ended up with 120 of his watercolors through a donation. And he also he wrote a lot of diaries and kept notes from his travels. And so he talked about this being on the land as kind of connecting with the Ice Age. He really liked the tranquil, peaceful landscape of the Arctic. Here I've pictured some prints that are interesting to read the titles. There's one about Healing Stone, and thinking about maybe being on the land in more of a spiritual way. And then George Raab behind me, also this work to my right is called Good Therapy. So George Raab is an artist based in Ontario. This is his natural surrounding around where he lives. And you think about forest bathing and the benefits that we all get from being in natural environments. But also, the forest being the lungs of the planet. So I really wanted to include that. On the other side, we see a charcoal forest that is all too familiar to us here, damaged from wildfires. And then this lone tree is also something that has figured widely and across different time periods of artists depicting the land, because there's these associations between the solitary tree and this sort of sense of the individual and the self. So you can kind of, you can look at this print and I think, you kind of have this sense of yourself alone in the landscape. And then Anne Kipling is in this corner here. Many of you would know her as an artist of the region, based for many, many, many years in Falkland, BC, and we have 236 artworks of Anne Kipling's, and in fact, these are drawings. A lot of them are prints. She's a very accomplished printmaker, along with George Raab. And many of those works came to us because her property was under the threat of wildfire. So we were taking care of these works, and then she donated them to our collection. And again, there's this, the tradition of en plein air, where you go out onto the land and paint. Like George Raab and Tona Only, like Rhonda and Rodney and Kipling actually went out into the land, and so she would take her paper, and her markings have this kind of quality of just being out there and getting a moment of like a gesture of what is in front of her, animals moving across the landscape, and she would often depict the same scene over and over as kind of this expressive experience and trying to capture what she saw. And then, also in the section, Germaine Koh, I would say, is like the artist who's literally reading the land in this exhibition. So this group of watercolors was drawn from her taking our hygrothermograph, which is a device that we use to measure the temperature and humidity in the gallery. She had me take it to my porch, to my car, take it out on excursions to read these, make these readings outside of the gallery, really subverting the whole purpose of this thing, which is to adhere to our climate conditions so that we can maintain our status as an A-grade institution. We can borrow work from other institutions, and we can lend it because we know that we share the same kind of controls of our climate. Well, Germaine, she just said, no, let's make some landscapes out of this. And so these funny readings are all over the place. And then after she would get these drawings from the hygrothermograph, then she went in with watercolor paint. So she made this whole series. My name is in the title of a lot of them because she wanted me to go and take it on these excursions before she arrived. So this was part of her 2013 exhibition here called Weather Systems. And we also acquired another work that was called Guts, and they were these big vacuum hoses that came out of our HVAC system up above. So it's a pleasure to be able to show those again. And then finally, in this corner, I know it's hard to squish in there, but there are a number of works by Donald Lawrence, Richard Prince, Rodney Graham, and then the other artists within this grouping that I'm thinking about called Experiments on the Land, Jerry Pethick and Scott Massey. And I'm sorry to rush this, and I know that all of you can get more delicious information from Dawn, who's there. But you'll know Dawn's work from our 2020 exhibition, Casting the Eye Drift. And so we're very fortunate to be able to start acquiring some of the work that he's made over the course of his career. And so I chose work from his underwater pinhole camera project, where you'll see his beautiful watercolor paintings from his kayak pinhole camera setup, and then the resulting photographs where he did pinhole photography underwater. So rather than taking just a waterproof camera like most of us would, he has created this technology that's referencing the history of photography and thinking also through his camera obscura work, optical devices and those histories, alongside his interest in connecting urban and so-called wilderness environments. And so there's a real experience and experimental quality to his work, and then the photos that come out of that. You'll see there's a print of Don in his camera obscura that was from a project in Tasmania, where he's navigating the waterways upside down and backwards inside this kayak camera obscura. And I noticed, actually, just more like as I started writing about this work, how much islands are, really come to the fore. As you know, islands have, like the lone tree, they have this kind of symbolic mythological quality. So Don's very interested in the intertidal zones and exploring islands in his work. Richard Prince also, you'll see some drawings that he made from a camera obscura and some dioramas. And Richard Prince is an artist who we have quite a few of his works in our collection as well. You'll see a sculpture that is a camera obscura. It actually functions like one, so you can look through. And you know, the reference here too is really to do with how we see. So it's connecting to our eye and our computer brain flipping the image. And so you can see that enacted in his work. And then this reference to islands, also uninhabited landscapes for Richard Prince, and sort of these places of solitude. For Richard Prince, he took kind of a taxonomy approach. I would say that all the artists in this grouping, for me, their interest crosses between art and science. And so there's like a slice, you can see the side view of Richard Prince's island there. Rodney Graham is one of Canada's most well-known, internationally showing artists. We're very fortunate to have a few of his works in our collection. This one came to us because he was making prints. He'd made a series of photographs that were upside down or inverted trees. And he made these prints specifically for a fundraiser for the Vancouver Art Gallery. And so a collector had bought one of these prints and donated it to us later. So again, Rodney Graham is using camera obscura to think about you know, how we see a landscape, and also really driving forward that whole the romantic idea of the lone tree, and making in most cases they're very large portraits of trees as if they're characters. The last two artists that I'll speak about, Jerry Pethick and Scott Massey. Jerry Pethick and Scott, I think, never met each other, but I know that Scott was very influenced by Jerry's work. Jerry Pethick, his practice, his career spanned from the 1960s to the 2000s, and he has been very influential on a lot of young artists. Maybe not someone you would think immediately as a landscape artist, but I pulled work from our collection that intimates this sort of idea of the land. But I love like the way that he does it. Some of these titles like Nature Overshadows All, or Sound of the Wind, that's this one here. And so Jerry Pethick's interest was also in this connection between art and science, and also subverting a linear perspective, and also the binaries that we create around seeing, and kind of what we expect a landscape to be. So you see he's used all of these different materials to kind of almost like layers of seeing. He's quite well known for working, being an innovator in holography. in the early 70s. And also he made big sculptures with photographic arrays, which are incredible. He uses Fresnel lenses, multiple lenses on top of all of these images of the same subject, and then they become a composite image. So he's really playing with the history of optical devices and thinking about how we see. And I would say Scott Massey is similar. You know, the work that we have, spectrum study, and also light adjustment, center of the universe, depict landscapes, but that's not as much what he's interested in. I would say that the sights are very important to him, but it's also how the camera as a device mediates our seeing. And so he adapted his own technology, kind of like Jerry, where he's got all these different color filters. And so spectrum studies there are photographs from different locations, many around here, where you see it's all in one analog photo, if you know what that is, for the youth who are here. This photo is taken in a Hasselblad camera using all of these different filters. And very exciting for us and for Scott to be able to show the video that's in this room for the first time, very large. So Scott had an exhibition here in 2021, and we showed all of the spectrum studies works. And so there are a room of photographs, and because of that, and because it was a solo exhibition, we showed light adjustments, the video on the other side of the wall, as a backlit video projection. So it was a lot smaller and didn't have the kind of same power as we're able to show it today. So for that work, he went to what is called the center of the universe. Some Tibetan monks deemed it the center of the universe in the 1980s around Vedette Lake. And he captured the sunrise and like a full 24 hours of light, essentially. There's the bookending of sunrises in his work. And he's interested in how photography has historically served as a visual aid to understanding the natural world, and in intervening or mediating himself with all these devices. You'll see this beautiful picturesque landscape that has a spiritual quality. It's also an important site for Indigenous peoples. But he's reminding us about our looking by using all these different lenses and interrupting that view. He doesn't move his camera, but he zooms in and out. And he's also incorporated this singing of a Robbie Burns ballad in the opening scene where you see the moon rising. There's some nice connections too between the full moon rising in Scott's work and in FLAR's work that we saw earlier. So I'm going to stop there so you can all enjoy your evening. And please there are so many artists and so many artworks, so please come and ask me any questions after this and enjoy your evening. Thank you for listening.